Now the next thing is that we're gonna allow to create tasks via our API. And for this, we first gonna need to be in our API routes file. Now in here, add the store action, which will allow us to store new tasks. And if we go to our list command, you'll see that there's now a new entry here to the store method of our task controller. And also notice that it has the same route as the index action, so the list of routes, but this requires us to use a HTTP post request. Now let's go to our tasks controller and add this store action. The first thing we want to do here is validate that the user or the client posted the correct data to this store method, which allows us to create an actual task model. So let's use Laravel's request validation for that. And we can call the validate method and pass rules for the title. And this is going to be a required field because it is also required in our database. And it will need to have a maximum amount of 255 characters because this is also the maximum string length in our database. Now with this, we can create a new task. So let's call the create method on the task. And in here, we're going to pass the validated data. And what we will return is the new task resource. And pass in the newly created task. Now, something else that we need to do is in our task model. In here, we're gonna need to add the title to the fillable fields for mass assignment. And we'll do that by defining the fillable property, which is going to be an array. And here we will add the title field. Do this because we want to restrict the fields that can be set using a mass assignment. So in here we just pass an array of all the fields that need to be set on the newly created task. And certain fields should not be allowed to set in such a manner. Think about the created at and updated at timestamps, for example. We should not be able to change them in such a manner. Now head over to Postman and create a new request for our store method. And we're going to use a HTTP post for that. We're gonna post to API/tasks, and we're gonna need to pass the title as a request body, and that will be JSON, and there needs to be a title field. Let's actually set this to JSON to get some nice syntax highlighting. And the value of the title is going to be learn for an exam. Now let's post this, and we see that we get a newly created resource back, a newly created task. Now if we would leave this empty, you'll notice that we get a validation error, and we need to actually set the accept header here as well to application JSON. And you'll see that we get a 422 unprocessable content response code back with the error message that the title field is a required field. Now if we also make a request for the index method, which will actually use the same URL, we see that in the list of resources, now this one is included as well, the second task that we created. Now let's go back to VS Code. So in our task controller, we do the validation, or we define the validation rules inline here, which is totally fine. But Laravel also has a built-in way to do this. And for that, we're gonna make a new request class using the artisan make command. And we will call this store task request. And you'll notice that here we get a new request class, and let's move our validation rule in there. And we're gonna authorize this request by default. So later on with permissions, you want to allow this maybe based on the permissions that the user has in your application. But for now on, we will allow all the users to make this request. Now in our task controller, instead of using this generic request class, we will use the store task request, and instead of validate, we need to call validated. Now let's go back to Postman one more time and check that this still works. In our body, let's create a new task, wait for my grade, and send this request. And also pay attention that we now get a 201 response. Actually, this should have been here before with the second task, or the one that we created before, which signals that a new resource has been created. I hope to see you in the next video.